Senate Majority Leader John Flanagan joins us in the studio now to discuss a few of the toughest issues that have to be dealt with before lawmakers leave town. It's great to see you.
Good morning.
So many people have emailed and called me with questions for you. You should consider doing a talk show like the mayor does on WNYC, a call-in show. I'll just let that sink in.
Susan, I'd rather do a talk show like yours. Okay, I'll just put it that way.
We don't have the ability to do a call-in show, but let's just get to one of the biggest issues of this session, and that's heroin abuse. Governor Cuomo has said he expects lawmakers to stay in Albany until they address the heroin epidemic. Is that going to get done?
Oh, yeah. I think there's an excellent chance that will get done. But let me just take a step back. Going back to 2014, a number of our colleagues, and I think the Senate has been way out in front on these issues, and it's a combination of and a variety of factors. Number one, Senator Boyle did a series of a dozen statewide hearings within a very condensed time frame in 2014. 11 bills that we passed have been signed and chaptered into law, which are all good things. Right now, we're at a juncture where no matter where you live, no matter what Assembly or Senate, Democrat, Republican, this is a massive and major issue for families all across the state of New York. So the timing of what we're doing is extremely important. Treatment, access, making sure that we have enforcement in a proper capacity, but I'm very confident that people of goodwill can sit down and get this done.
So how do you feel about the governor's expectations, considering that the Senate did create this task force on the issue back in 2014? You've passed some legislation, you've already released other recommendations, like 28 recommendations, and the governor has not yet released his final recommendations.
You know what? You mentioned a number of legislative days we have left. While it's 5 days, on paper, 5 days in Albany can seem like a lifetime. There's plenty of things that we can get done. I think the governor has made this a priority, dovetailing on what the Senate has done. Senator Murphy, Senator Amador, Senator Ord, all of our colleagues have made this a major priority, a major focus. So I'm less concerned about the timing of what we can achieve as a result.
You don't feel that you're pressured?
Okay. That's okay. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
To feel pressured?
Correct.
Several parents who have lost children to heroin have said that there's a key thing that lawmakers can help with, requiring insurance companies to pay for 90 days of inpatient treatment. And Senator Patty Ritchie, a Republican in your conference, is sponsoring that bill in the state Senate. But it has been sitting in the insurance committee since January. Why?
Because it is a very significant, broad, sweeping, and far-reaching public policy issue. And it touches on a variety of different things. We want to make sure that we have access and opportunity, but we also have to be mindful of cost. What I hear from parents and what I hear from my colleagues is making sure that when you have a child, and a child can in this case be an adult over 21, making sure that they have access, and things like pre-authorization and continued denials are not the order of the day. Whether it's 3 days, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, I believe is kind of secondary to making sure whomever it may be gets access to treatment right away. That's the thing that I've heard the most.
What we've heard from some of these folks is that this is such a pernicious disease, this addiction, that the 28 days just isn't enough, and that if we spend the money on 28 days, the recidivism rate is like 98%. You go into the 28-day rehab, and you go right back onto the heroin when you get out there. But a 90-day would save money. Is it something that you're even considering?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you mentioned Patty Ritchie, Senator Murphy. And again, this cuts across all political lines, and this is
in socioeconomic lines.
Socioeconomic. This is a quality of life issue that is it's in every community across the state of New York. So, are we discussing that? Absolutely, and we should.
What kind of talks have you had with the Assembly on heroin legislation? I mean, do you see, a big package of bills being agreed to and passed before next Friday?
I do, and we've had ongoing conversations. This has certainly been a primary subject when we've had leaders' meetings. The governor has brought this up. Senator Klein, Assemblyman Hasty. I've certainly offered very cogent comments in terms of the advocacy of our conference. But yeah, absolutely, this is has continued to come up, and our staffs, and we shouldn't lose sight of this. They are meeting regularly, drilling down on all the details, because you and I can have a cerebral discussion, a macro discussion, but to your very basic point, this is a pernicious issue, as you said, aptly describing it, that this is something that is long overdue in terms of us properly addressing it.
So give us a specific of one new piece of legislation that you think will cut the mustard and pass through both houses that the governor would sign.
Well, I think we're in a fundamentally good spot because we put $167 million in the budget this year, and we're at a juncture now where that money has to be properly allocated. So to me, that was the quintessential good start. And then going back to what I said before, making sure that if a child, and again, an adult, finds himself in harm's way, that they are not denied treatment initially. And as you move into, as you said, the 28 days, I think we could be at a point where the 28 days is not a black and white, you're in, you're out, that it allows for further and appropriate review. So 28 days may get to the 90 days that you're talking about.
So meanwhile, the Assembly has already passed, and the governor has said he would support 3 years of mayoral control for Mayor de Blasio. Are you willing to go there?
You know, I forgot to add something about the heroin, which I think is... No, I'll come back to mayoral control for sure. But I believe that the Senate has more of a focus on enforcement and enhancement of criminal penalties, which the Assembly is loath to discuss. So we believe it should be a multifaceted approach, and one of that should be...
Okay, would that preclude any deal? I mean,
no,
if the Assembly is focused on one thing and the Senate is focused on another, is that going to make it difficult for you guys to agree?
I am confident that we can come to an agreement, but I would not want to lose sight of the fact that this is a priority for people who are involved in law enforcement and certainly a lot of our members. We're going to mayoral control. A lot of
elements, yeah.
Yeah. Mayoral control, I have been unequivocal. You can't find any statement now or in the past or even prospectively. I believe in mayoral control. I've said that all along. So the question becomes one of qualitative and quantitative in terms of what direction should we go, what has been the proven track record of the mayor, and in this case, Mayor de Blasio, as it was for Mayor Bloomberg. And 3 years to me is too long a period of time. We extended mayoral control for 1 year last year, and I think there's been a window of 365 days to look at what has transpired. And in our estimation, not enough has been done to protect the children of the city of New York, and I want to be ridiculously clear. I believe in education for children all across the state of New York, including the city of New York with 1.1 million students. Any suggestion to the contrary is patently false and ridiculous. I am focused on this along with my colleagues, and we are guided in large part by Senator Golden, Senator Lanza, and Senator Felder, all of whom hail from the city of New York.
The New York Daily News suggested that the Assembly sort of has the Senate over a barrel since the Assembly passed their 3-year bill and could just leave town, leaving the Senate to take the blame for what happens in the city without an extension of mayoral control. Are you willing to take that risk?
The Assembly passed legislation last year that never got signed into law. So let's go back and just take a quick historic perspective. What they advocated last year along with the governor is not what was enacted. We took a position that mayoral control should be 1 year, and that's what happened at the end of the day. That was actually signed into law. Where we are now, I'm not going to deviate from where we started. We put additional safeguards in terms of having a monitor oversee where's the money going in the city of New York. And we send over $9 billion to the city of New York. I don't think it's unreasonable nor unfair to ask questions about where the money is going and is it being properly spent.
But, Senator, the governor, who's not a fan of the mayor, they have their own issues, but he said that he would not support that and that he wants 3 years. So, I mean, someone's going to have to negotiate or make some sort of deal.
Yeah, but I'll go back, and I respect the governor's opinion. I just don't happen to agree with it, as was the case last year. His advocacy in terms of mayoral control was different than what we ultimately compromised on, and I am confident that mayoral control will continue. I'm confident that we will achieve a resolution by the end of next week, as long as everybody's willing to get in a room and act in a civil and
So you're willing to compromise?
If to sit in the legislature in either house, either party, particularly as a leader, if you're not willing to compromise, you're in the wrong business. There's no way that I'm going to get everything our conference wants, and there's no way the governor's going to.
You say that, but I've heard a lot of people, not necessarily you, saying, I'm drawing a line in the sand, and you've heard that kind of rhetoric before as well.
And you know what? We did draw a line in the sand on a couple of things, and you and I have discussed at great length things like the gap elimination adjustment. We drew a line in the sand on that, and I think for all valid and meritorious reasons, and we gave another record increase in aid to education. So periodically drawing a line in the sand is has some real significant upside benefits.
Let's shift our focus to upstate New York. Politico reported last week that the Department of Health knew about the PFOA contamination in Hoosick Falls for over a year. Now that we know that, do you think that hearings are warranted?
You know, I have spoken extensively with Senator Marchione, who cares very, very deeply about these issues.
Well, she represents that district for my listeners.
Of course she does, and I think in large part we should be guided by what she thinks is important. To me, you have two primary issues. One is, how do you protect the people of those communities, and how do you do it in an expeditious fashion? So my overarching goal is we need a result now. You can do sort of a after-the-fact review. Having hearings can have some potential benefit, but what I'd rather see is action that provides proper drinking water and proper safeguards. And by the way, this is not just about the state of New York. It also has to do with the EPA and their listing of certain chemicals. So it's a multifaceted issue that is certainly complex, but at the end of the day, whether it's Hoosick Falls or where I live in the town of Huntington, people want clean, safe, potable drinking water.
Oh, absolutely. And you said that we might want to do sort of a post-mortem just to see what happened so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So is that something that you would support, whether you call it hearings or whatever you want to call it? Mistakes may have been made. Shouldn't we prevent them from happening again?
I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, oftentimes the best way to learn is to learn from people's mistakes, whether it's a government agency or an action taken by the legislature or anyone else. But again, Senator Marchione has been very aggressive in a diplomatic way on behalf of her constituents, and at the end of the day, we want to see a positive, effective result.
You mentioned potable drinking water, and lead in the drinking water is something that's also been talked about in this legislative session. Is that bill, the O'Mara bill, going to come to the floor for a vote, which tests drinking water in schools?
That is... I'm going to say that I'm going to have to go back and discuss that with my colleagues in conference. Has that come up in painstaking detail at this juncture? No, but that doesn't mean that something can't happen before the end of session.
I thought it was linked, so we'll move on to pension forfeiture. This is one of the ethics issues that has been called not just the low-hanging fruit, but the fruit that's fallen on the floor. Is that going to be addressed? I know you guys have addressed it, and the Senate and the Assembly has addressed it, but you need to address it together.
Yes, but I think it's important to focus on several basic things. Number one is making sure that the public has faith in their government. Number two, that they have trust in their government. So when you talk about buzzwords like honesty, integrity, and trust, that's all very important. And if we don't have that, then we're going to be in harm's way. So last year, and this is certainly prior to me becoming leader, as part of the budget resolution, there was an agreement on pension forfeiture. And you know, Susan, you pay attention. A lot of people don't really factually understand this. It is a constitutional amendment, a proposed constitutional amendment. So in some respects, it's not, the governor doesn't have to sign it into law, which is a very significant distinction. The Senate honored the commitment that was made last year on that issue in terms of where we should go on pension forfeiture. We maintain that commitment. We still do that right now. The Assembly walked back from what was agreed to by them, along with the Senate and the governor last year. So we're in a unique position. It is absolutely a fundamental core part of everything that's being discussed in terms of ethics, and validly so.
So it's on the Assembly now to get it.
You know what? It's on everybody. It's on everybody. The Senate has clearly staked out the position and honored an agreement that was made last year. So like anything else, you and I spoke about the word compromise before. The Senate has not deviated from the position that we took and the vote that we took last year, but we are having ongoing discussions with the executive and the Assembly on ethics issues, which is a very, very important part of the work that we need to get done.
How likely is it that session could extend into the following week?
The following week? Zero.
Zero. Okay.
Zero.
Thank you. That was Senate Majority Leader John Flanagan. We appreciate your time and for coming in today.
Thank you all, as always.